Hi, and welcome to Music Calgary's Sound Off Summit Back on Track series. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 nations in southern Alberta and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the panel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Music Calgary's Sound Off Summit's Back on Track series. I'm your moderator, Peggy Hogan. And before we start, this is a virtual panel, and I know that each of us on the panel are joining you from different spaces, and that many of you tuning in will be tuning in from Calgary. I just wanted to acknowledge that me personally, I'm streaming here from Tiohtià:ke, which is the unceded territory of Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. And I encourage you all, wherever you may be, to investigate the land that you occupy and learn more about the original peoples of that land. That being said, I would love to dive into this panel. Very briefly, as I said, I'm Peggy Hogan. I'm label manager and somewhat of a marketing manager at Ouutside Music and Nextdoor Records. My colleague Evan is here, and we're also joined by Hallie Anderson from Rareform. So why don't you two introduce yourselves? I'll hand it over to Evan first.
Hi, my name is Evan Newman. I'm the owner of Ouutside Music, which has a couple labels, Ouutside Music and Nextdoor Records. And I have the great pleasure of working with Peggy, and we're based all over Canada.
Hi, I'm Hallie. I was previously at Mom and Pop Music, which is a record label based in New York. But last year in July, we launched a new company, me and two business partners, called Rareform, and we work with artists, managers, labels, and distributors on marketing and release strategies.
Fabulous. So we are here today to talk about what are labels and what are label services, which is a fascinatingly confusing topic. So I wanted to just kind of start off with each of you kind of telling us your perspective on the difference between what a kind of traditional record label does for an artist versus what is now known in the industry as label services. I know at Ouutside it's a two-way street. Both kinds of packages are offered, and I think Rareform specializes in label services. So I would love to know what you think each of you do in these capacities. Whoever wants to jump in, go right ahead.
I'll let Hallie lead on this one.
Sure. So, I think the real difference is there are lots of options out there for artists. There are more options than there probably ever have been before. I think when you think about a traditional label, I think the first thing that comes to mind are, a slew of different indie labels based, all over the world that maybe specialize in specific genres or slightly more curated rosters of artists. And then you have major labels, which I think are, there's a handful of them, and they're maybe a little bit less specialized. They may have sub-labels within them. And then on the label services side, you have a lot of different distribution options, and that can range from, a maybe more hands-on distributor offering an artist direct deal to a more plug and play service, such as like a DistroKid, where anybody can sign up online and they can be your pipeline to get your music up onto different streaming services. I'd say how our company fits into that is we work alongside of labels and distributors. So we are not necessarily the pipeline, but for a lot of artists or managers, we kind of help fill in some of the gaps that they might lose when choosing to go with a distributor or a direct artist deal versus a full label.
Ours, and I think our particular agreements through a label and for label services. In a label environment, it's basically the artist is licensing their copyrights to us for an allotted period of time, sometime between 5 and 10 years. And we are in turn investing in the marketing and promotion, manufacturing, sometimes in the creation of the recording in exchange for that copyright. And so we act as the marketing, the promotion, basically everything for the record release. In a label services deal, we are not licensing the copyright. We are providing a service to distribute the record, which is sort of the baseline, both physically and digitally. And we can offer project management, but most, if not all, of the funding is coming from the artist. And it's a set percentage deal that we will take for providing the label service. And it's a global setup for us where we will distribute your record throughout the world. We have partners in every major territory. But in the end, the artist is able to retain ownership of their title. And our deals are just for 1 year that turn over as we go or terminate as we go.
Thanks. So one thing I want to kind of touch on in terms of the two different territories that are represented here, the US versus Canada, is the question of funding. Naturally, one of the main differences in these two markets is that Canada has a very lucky access to some government arts funding, which I think makes a traditional label a little bit more attractive for artists, in the sense that being with a company like a label will generally allow for more legitimacy for the artist to access their own funding that they apply for, as well as a set of funds that may be coming directly from the label. That being said, in the States, I know it's different, and that there's a lot of personal investment that artists are having to put in, regardless of whether they're on a more traditional label or in a label services arrangement. And I'm wondering if either of you could speak on this idea of, like, in this digital age, the traditional label is becoming less and less attractive. And without something shiny like government arts funding, what is the benefit of being on a traditional label versus really taking your project by the reins and going into a label services distribution deal?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that for a lot of artists, the choice to self-fund can be a really freeing choice. I think it can, give them a lot of creative control. They can dictate the strategy. They can choose to hire the teams that they want to hire. But a lot of that onus in leading that project is really on the artist and the artist management team more and more. And you then have to find a distributor or some way to get your music from, your computer onto DSP platforms. So, there's a lot of different options out there, but, there are some distributors that are offering artist direct deals that do have funding attached from them, but still that, strategy and leading the project, that still does fall onto the artist and manager, maybe more than it would in a traditional label setup. And I think there are still really great things about labels. They do give you access to marketing funds. You get access to a team of people, and they're there to help you create that strategy, create that plan, give you access to people that may be more challenging to access in the industry as an independent artist. They're curating essentially a group of music that they're then pitching and helping to gain more profile for. So, be it maybe there's more access to music than ever before, and artists self-funding can get their music up onto streaming services. You can pitch through back ends of Spotify and Amazon, but at the same time, there's more music than ever before. So that question of how do you cut through the noise of tens of thousands of releases that are being released every single day and get your music heard over somebody else's music is still a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is such a an undertaking to release a record. And granted, when I first started out in this business, the amount of gatekeepers that, were in place in order for you to sort of bypass to get your music into stores or online, it was almost impossible without the assistance of a label. And now all those barriers are removed, which makes it really easy for an artist to self-release, align with the distributor, and hire a team. Sometimes when we entertain taking on new artists and they have their, everything together, we're just like, you know what, you don't need us. And we can sort of in turn go and be like, we can offer label services where we'll just do the distribution. But there's a lot to conquer in this, in being a successful artist. And a lot of that involves having a team and being able to sort of offload a lot of the responsibilities that an artist can't do because they're busy creating, busy touring, busy managing their life. And that's where a label comes in, where shared strategies, being able to access certain people, having access to both private and public funding to allow for the artist to fulfill their goals of what they want to do. And sometimes, at least in Canada, you have to reach certain plateaus in order to access a lot of the funding. And we have direct access, which helps in the artist having that access to capital.
I think it also depends on, what the goals are of that artist project, or maybe where you're seeing traction. Like, there are still things that are incredibly expensive to run, such as radio campaigns in the US, touring. If, you have support opportunities where, a label is making an investment into an artist. And so in some ways you can tap into that investment. And it's less of a burden for an artist that is developing. But then there are other artists that, do have cash flow and capital that they can tap into, whether that's through sync income, touring income, depending on where they are in their artist career, where they don't need that same type of investment. But at least here in the States, we don't have arts funding in the same way. So there are less options for an artist to seek funding in America than in Canada or other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when you enter into a label agreement, you are giving up a significant portion of income for the ability to have a team on your side, and you have to weigh those things. Some of our artists at a certain point have said, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a step back. I'm enjoying my sound exchange money and I'd like to enjoy more of it. So I would like to just retain ownership and utilize you guys for straight up distribution. And that's where we come in as a label services, because we will not have access to neighboring rights or sound exchange or anything like that. And that allows the artist to maximize that earning potential on that stream per se.
Evan, you brought up an interesting point in terms of the A&R perspective of a label versus label services. I know at Outside, when we're looking at an artist that's suitable for label services, we're really looking for someone that already has a lot going for them. Whereas Hallie, I've noticed that your roster is a lot of emerging artists. And so I want to know kind of what your A&R perspective is in terms of how are you deciding the markers of the people that you're working with, and what kind of growth are you looking at from these artists?
So I think the big difference is we are not signing artists, right? So we are not a distributor, we are not a label. What we offer is, marketing, digital, and strategy support to an artist. So I think for us, it's a little bit different, and that's something that they hire and pay us, like you would hire a publicist or a radio plugger. So what we're offering to an artist kind of layers on top of a distribution deal. So when we're having conversations with artists, what we're looking at is they might be putting more money to bring us on up front and more investment into their project to bring us up front. But, 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, we're not really involved in that campaign anymore. And they're now they are not paying us the same way you would no longer be paying a publicist or a radio plugger that helped you get your record to a certain level. and I think when we're considering working with artists, what we're really looking at is what is going on in your artist picture. Like, is there something that's reacting that we can then take and build and grow, and help offer you a strategy, whether it's like the best released cadence, creative marketing ideas, how to hire and manage teams around the world, where we'll kind of step in to add that layer to an artist team. So for us, like, a lot of the artists that we're working with are developing and emerging artists that have some type of fire going, and we're working to feed it and then spread that throughout other areas of their business.
So just as a case study, if we were to say, like, we have an artist, a developing artist or something, and we were to contact you and say, hey, we'd like to have Airform take this on for us, and we have distribution in place in the US, and what does your company provide to us as a label who has a developing artist? What are the services that are provided to us?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on, an artist's picture, right? So like, not every artist is going to be the same, and not every artist team is going to be the same, but generally we work very closely with management, or very closely with the label that's hiring us. There are some labels we work with that are ex-US labels that really wanted to have a team here on the ground. So what we're looking at is, putting all the different pieces together. So are we hiring publicists for you? Are we hiring radio pluggers, helping to manage them, passing them information, using and utilizing all the tools that different DSPs are offering to artists, and working those into their timeline. When is the best time to release a single? How does your touring fit into that? So it isn't like a one size fits all, because every artist picture is a little different. But, if there was, say, you had a track that was connecting and going viral on TikTok, it might be, okay, how do we translate this into elongate that plan and have it start impacting into streaming services and feeding that information back to DSPs to be pitching for bigger playlists? Or do we bring on a radio team now to then start taking the song to radio at a different format? Or it could potentially be that you have a song that's developing at radio, and now we want to try to develop it in other spaces. So it really depends on that artist. There's not an easy answer, I guess.
Of course.
Evan, in terms of A&R considerations, at Outside, of course, there are 2 labels as well as a label services arm. So can you tell us a bit about, like, what are some of the considerations that you make as an A&R for both labels, like what kinds of artists you're looking at Outside versus Nextdoor, and then also, like, what kind of artist might come to you and then you'd be like, you know what, like, let's just go straight to distro?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of in the same breath as, like, it's complicated and it varies. For us, I think we want to be able to construct a collaborative relationship, someone that we can look to and say, hey, we feel that with our involvement and the connections we have and the people we're able to access, we can help take this band to the next level. And I hate using that term, but it is sort of like being viable. One of our sort of mandates that is sometimes met is that the artist has to be a full-time artist, and we have to be able to provide that platform for them to make enough money from, excuse the word, the exploitation of their music and revenue earned from all streams. And then sometime an artist will come to us and be, have sort of everything together and have a successful track record and say, hey, you know what, we're not going to bring any benefit to this project. We're not going to move the needle for you. We're not going to do anything, but what we can do is provide the nuts and bolts to your operation, and that is the distribution. We work with an artist who's a highly successful multi-platinum recording artist, and his management team came to us and said, we do not know anything about a label. We are artist managers. We come from a touring background, and we want to be able to enlist you to cover off all the bases that we know nothing about. And so we're able to do that. And our relationship is very complementary to one another. It's like, they don't necessarily question what we do, but we have delivered the results for them. So when we're looking for things, and Peggy is somebody who signs artists for Nextdoor Records, is that we need to you know, obviously believe in the people and the music they're doing, but also that we can make a difference in their career. Because we're going to sink a lot of time and effort, and it's something that we're always so invested in. And if it doesn't go well, it not only hurts us financially, but it hurts us personally, because we care a lot about the projects we work with, for the most part. And so it's really an emotional and financial investment when you collaborate with an artist to release a record. And it's something that we really want to believe that we can make a difference in their career.
For the very beginning emerging artist, let's say they've like worked on some music, maybe they've released some stuff on their own, but they're looking to build out their team, and they're thinking about contacting either a label or a label services company. I'm wondering, what are you looking for in terms of an approach, and what should an artist come prepared with? Like when you get that initial email, what are you looking for within that email?
I mean, for our standpoint, is a basic understanding of who we are and what we do. I get an email a day from somebody who has no clue who we are or what we do. And what we, there's a lot of, we often joke about this, is like the male artist who approaches us, and then there's the female artist who approaches us, and the male artist is like, you should sign me, I'm the best thing ever. Whereas the female artist comes in and says, I'd really appreciate if you were to give my record a listen. I've worked hard, and it's hence why most of our roster is made up of female, and non-binary and non-male artists. But there is an understanding of what a label can do for you when you look at it, and have a bit of knowledge of just a bit on how the industry works. And the thing that often sort of gets my attention is if they realize the other artists we work with and say, I'm a fan of so-and-so, and I really like their record, and I like their approach or something. It's just like, okay, you have a grasp of who we are in terms of our identity as a label, but also that that, yeah, we can take similar like-minded artists and work with them. So yeah, just a basic understanding, and from that, and then also a bit of a track record for us. Like, we can't really start at ground zero. We need just a bit of, because I think it benefits the artist if there's a bit of touring under their belt, if there's a couple records, or even one where it's just like you've been through a bit of the process, that we do not have to really start from scratch. And granted, we have taken on artists where it's sort of proven that we really need to do some hand-holding, and that's fine. But being able to sort of get a bit of a career under your belt, whether it's touring, recording, playing in somebody else's band, songwriting, things like that, just so there's a bit of something to build off of.
Yeah, I'd honestly say it's pretty similar, right? So I think that we'd want to make sure that we can help them, right? Like, we're not going to work with somebody that we don't think that we can add value to what they're already doing. So generally, artists already have some fan base developed. They have something kind of happening, and maybe it's like there's been some moment that they now need to scale up what they're doing. Or we also look, most of our campaigns, like, it's very difficult for us to come in mid-album cycle. So usually we're being brought on before an album is released, before an EP is released. So they'd have to have like some unreleased music. And I think we want to make sure that they know what they think the next step is in their career, or where they see the trajectory going, and that they are in it for the long haul. Like, building and developing an artist takes a really long time and a lot of energy. And, I think you look at a lot of artists and you're like, wow, this artist came out of nowhere. They had this, amazing tour, this amazing sync happen, or all of a sudden it's on all these playlists. But what you don't see is the years of work that artist put in to get to that moment. And so, we want to make sure that the artists that we're working with are in it for the long haul and like really working on building and developing a fan base, and that we can come in and help them refine what they're doing and help them, build off the successes that they've already had. So it does take an artist doing some of that work by themselves generally before we get involved. And we're also generally hired by management teams or a distributor or a label. So they usually have some type of team already before they start working with us. And that could be, maybe it's just a publicist or just an agent or just a manager, but there's usually somebody else that's been working with them on development already.
Yeah, and I always say like the biggest, not the red flag, but when someone solicits us and they have their timeline in place, and they'll email us in July saying, I'm going to put out my record in October. I'd really love for you guys to be on board. Just like, no, right now we're planning for fall 2023. And the amount of preparation it takes to set up an emerging artist is so great. And there's so much work that needs to be done prior to a launch of a record. So I always say to artists, don't come in with a timeline, because I can guarantee 100% of the time it's not going to work with our timeline. So just to realize that it is only old to you as an artist. Like I've made this record 6 months ago and I want it out. It's just like, no, that record might not come out for 2 more years. Because that's just the amount of time needed to properly set up a record.
When it comes to an artist approaching either a label or label services, both of you have mentioned kind of like being at a certain point in an artist's career and potentially having some team members around them. That being said, a lot of the artists I know are incredibly frustrated by the amount of work they have to do. And there's always this desire to be like, I need help and I need to offload some of this onto somebody else. So I'm wondering, like, is there a point where it's really too early for an artist to be contacting a label or a company like Rareform? And in addition to that, like, what is the most realistic first team member that artists should be reaching out to?
I don't think there's
I have opinions on this, so
Okay.
I'm interested in hearing what you all have to say.
I don't think there's like the same moment in time for everybody. I don't think I don't think you could quantify that in any way. I do think that it is a lot of work to be a musician, and it's a very hard road. And even when you're a successful musician, you're probably more busy than you've ever been, just in a different way. And I think when you're going to a label or you're hiring teams, it's going to cost you something, whether that's signing away some of your rights, whether that's paying for our services, paying for publicists, like, it's going to cost you something. So what I try to tell artists is, like, wait as long as you can and build as far as you can build on your own until it's like, all right, maybe we've toured our local community and we're selling a good number of tickets and we've developed this local fan base. So maybe that means it's time for you to start looking for an agent. But if, like, you can't sell any tickets, it's going to be very difficult for an agent to come in and help you develop your touring. Or if you don't really have any music released yet and you don't really have an audience, there's not much that we can do for you. It would mostly be directing you to continue to put out, continue to talk to your fan base through different social platforms, use different tools that are offered on Spotify or YouTube to really communicate with an audience. So, I'd say when it gets to a point where you kind of have a fan base developing, that's usually the point where you could have somebody come in. I'd say a lot of those first people that artists work with, a lot of times, like, could be an agent, it could be a manager, it could also be a really passionate friend that just helps you organize things a little bit better than what you're already doing. Maybe they're, advancing your show with a venue for you, or helping you sell merch, or helping you create content or post content. I think a big struggle that we see a lot of artists is like the balance of like being a musician and creating music, but also having to be a content creator. And I think that there's a really big push and pull with that. But what I like to think of it, not so much as like a content creator, but these are mediums and tools that you have at your disposal that you can tell your story. So whatever that story is, whether it's your story as an artist, your story of a song, your story of an album, like these are outlets that you have. And when you've exhausted all those resources and you are doing so many other things that you don't have time to, be hitting up different press outlets to try to get your band covered or creating content, then that's when you start hiring people into your ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to add. That's pretty much it. Like, if you're too busy, I mean, I know in Canada, the big consumption time suck is grant writing. And I know if that's overwhelming to you as an artist, there are plenty of people you can hire to write your grants. But yeah, you have to sort of, there comes a time where you're like, I'm getting a lot of interest in people trying to book me, and festivals are reaching out, and you're like, you know what? Now you are attractive to booking agents, and that's when you reach out, because booking agents, they make 10% off of your live revenue, and it's a lot of work to be an agent, and you need to come usually to the table with some sort of momentum, and momentum does not equate to being busy per se. Like, you might be busy, but it's also just figuring out how to project manage yourself and utilize your friends and utilize sort of people you can hire to do certain things, whether it be a tour manager or enlist a friend, those kind of things. It's just, you'll know when it's too busy and that there are things that you cannot actually handle, where the expertise of a record label or a label services organization, they can come in to take that load off, and it will be lucrative to all.
But I think that that's a good point, right? Like, if there are specific things you need help with, you can hire somebody to do that specific thing. And I think, for a manager, they're only going to, make money if you're making money, or an agent is only going to make money if you're making money. So like, and somebody wanting to work with you as an artist, you have to show like that there is some revenue here in some form. So, if you can wait as long as possible, I would wait and, hire around what maybe isn't your skill set. So like if it is grant writing, and, find someone to help you with that. Or if it is video editing, hire someone to help you with that. Or there's so many tools out there on the internet, that people can enlist to help with specific tasks. But I think even when you come into a label or you come into a distribution deal and hire somebody like us, like, I only can work with what I have to work with, and I can't create an artist story for them. So I think an artist does really need to be pretty solidified in what their story is, what their sound is, and what they want to share with their building and budding community and fan base.
It strikes me that there is, on both sides, labels and label services, a great deal of investment in all of the artists that we work with. But that type of investment is slightly different given the circumstances of these deals. And I wonder if there is, as a result, a difference in the metrics for how you measure the success of a campaign. So a label versus label services in terms of like growth, or like, is this artist meeting the, ideal markers of success here?
I mean, for label services, for us, it's very transactional. So it's like, you were giving us a record, we are providing a service. We have a brief moment of time to capitalize and to earn, the amount of money that the artist expects and that we expect. So say it's a cycle, which can be, you know, anywhere from 6 months to 18 months. And at the end of that, we're like, the cycle's over. Here's what we've been able to accomplish. Here's our percentage that we've taken, and we're able to pay out the artist, and the artist has in turn made money. On the label side, it's not so transactional because it is such a long-term investment, where you take, you have the copyright for an extended period of time. So when the record comes out, it might not hit, but 2 years later, you might get a call from a music supervisor saying, I want to use this as a theme song for an MCU movie or something, where it's just like, and now there's renewed interest. So we always look for a big picture, and we want to see artistic growth, and we want to see a developed fan base, because we'll use record number one as a launch pad for record number two, and so on and so forth, as we build careers of our artists. And most of our artists have been with us between 4 and 10 records. Like some of our artists now are making their 10th record for us. And so we can't look at every record as a strict transactional moment. We just have to look at the career trajectory of an artist. And on the label services, we're just like, it's more immediate as to what we can provide and what we can earn for the artist and what we can earn for the company.
Yeah, and a distributor, like, they're looking at volume. So because it is more transactional, or it is, you know, self-service, where you never really interface with a real person, and you filled out a form on their platform to get your music online for some, you know, whether it's a small percentage or it's a per ingestion fee, like those companies are making money because of the sheer volume of how much music they're delivering into DSPs. So I think for those types of distributors, success is more, you know, they aren't looking at success, they're looking at volume. And so for an artist, it's really about like what's successful to them. I'd say for me, coming into a campaign and working with an artist, I want to see growth, so that they're in a better place at the end of that record cycle than they were in the beginning of that record cycle. Maybe it's that, you know, their reach on socials have grown. Maybe it's that their followers and listeners on Spotify are larger than they were when we first started working with them. Or if you can track, you know, where one track was on day 3, maybe this track is ahead of where that track was on day 3. Or it could be that on this campaign, they got their late night TV debut. Like, I think there's a lot of measures of success, but it really just depends on the scope and scale of what you're looking at. I'd say when you start talking to like a major label or something like that, their metrics for success are probably much greater. They also make massive investments into artists. So depending on what that investment is, that could really determine what they're looking for a metric of success.
So I think we're nearing our ending moment here, but just to wrap it up in a very positive note, I'm wondering if both of you could share something from the last couple years that was like a great shining moment for one of the artists that you work with, just like an example of like, wow, this is like really working. People still listen to music. I love working in this industry.
Well, for us, I think it's and we have a lot of artists that have sort of give us that pride and a lot of the fuel to continue on, because the business is not always friendly or healthy. But for us, I think when we look at Tamara Lindemann, who is the weather station, as a benchmark, we've been working with her for 7 years now. And when she came to us on her last record, Ignorance, and said what she wanted to do, and she had just shown such immense growth, and she was making a bit of a left turn, and our belief in her and what she was able to do, and then to see the response on the record and seeing it, you know, on all the top 10 lists across the world, and looking at that, it's just, you know, you just believe so much in that artist, and it's so great to see that artist stick to their vision and be true to themselves and make the record they wanted to make, and for it to be heard. And a lot of our other artists have said, you know, I just want what Tamara has. And it's a very complimentary, it's not in an envious or fueled by jealousy. It's just, she made the record she wanted to make, and it got massive acclaim, both from critics, from fans. And it's really rewarding to watch her not compromise her artistic integrity and to sort of just focus on what she wanted to say and the music she wanted to make, and for it to be successful, because it is rare.
Yeah, I'd say for me, you know, we work with so many amazing artists that are independent and have, you know, very specifically chosen to stay independent. And, you know, we work with one artist that's developing. His name is Windsor, and we started working with him after he was featured on another artist song. And off the back of that, we helped him build out a whole campaign for an EP. And this feature came out almost a year ago now. And, you know, watching what we've been able to do with the tracks that came after that, and, you know, people not only discovering him through that feature and becoming fans of his, and, you know, his platforms and socials growing, but also like songs that he wrote that were, you know, kind of the same thing, like really his vision and speaking about really personal, challenging things that he went through as a person, and seeing fans really connect with that, and like why we all love music. Like, I think that, you know, reading those comments, or, you know, watching that kind of connection between a fan and artist, like that's really amazing and beautiful to me. You know, of course, like streaming numbers and all of that is great, but I think they're a bit devoid of some of that kind of like the beauty of music. So that's been really rewarding. And then watching artists that touring was a really big part of their business and a really big part of how they connect with artists, finally being able to get back on the road and selling shows out, and fans being in the room together, and, you know, watching them maybe feeling throughout the pandemic a bit closed off in their home markets, now finally being able to get out and do international touring again. I think that's been a big win for a lot of artists in the last year.
Well, thank you both for being here for the Sound Off Summit's Back on Track series, Labels versus Label Services. This has been incredibly informative. I've learned things from Evan that I never thought I would learn, despite talking to him every day. And Hallie, such a pleasure to talk to you about Rareform and all of the work you do. So I think this is a great place to wrap it up. And, you know, we'll end there. Thank you, Music Calgary, for having us.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you so much.